This is the title of my talk, What is this thing? And I present a thing. It's here. And I'm going to pass it around.
Is it a mushroom?
That's a good question. Is it a mushroom? So shall we ask, what is this thing? I thought perhaps we could theorize it together. If I passed around a toaster or a blanket or a puppy, the question might not seem so pressing. What is it about this thing that seems to demand the question, what is this in particular? At least when I first encountered this thing, it wasn't clear. Or another way of saying that, my mind lingered with it in confusion before eventually settling on a sufficiently satisfactory account by which I wasn't bothered by it anymore. Or another way of saying that, the thing itself is perfectly clear, it's having no trouble being here at all, it's us with the trouble. For starters, we can observe something peculiar. Already, by approaching this object with the question, what is this thing, we reveal it in a funny way. We prepare the ground, as it were. Our theoretical stance is not neutral. It's already a constitution, a fashioning of the thing. That is to say, we are already making it matter in a certain way. Words like objective and subjective are irrelevant here. We can't obtain objective value-free knowledge of this thing, for already, in our theoretical posture, we have turned the thing into something for us by virtue of our questioning. What we can begin to do, however, is accumulate positions or perspectives by which our position among things in the world shifts. We can do this through the application of a concept, one of the central ways we approach doing theory. The concept of materiality might help us ask different kinds of questions and will perhaps reveal this thing or rejuvenate our perspective of it and take us by the hand into the world in a new way, depending on what conceptualization of materiality we adopt. Some materiality theorists use the concept to highlight the physicalness or tangibility of a thing. For example, Benjamin Orlov differentiates between a conventional semiotics approach to analyzing things, which might focus on representation, the meanings of symbols depicted and the possible interpretations of content, versus a materiality approach, which will focus on the durability of a thing, its transportability, its weight, its textures. So with this new theoretical framing, we might ask then of this thing, how do I apprehend it in terms of its physical properties? What does it feel like? We can say it's heavier than we anticipate. I mean, I'm sure it hasn't made its way back to the end of the room. No, it's just there. But the experience typically is that it's heavier than we anticipate, given its size. Sort of spoilers for the people at the back. Which is a type of experience in which expectation is disrupted as more of our flesh encounters more of its surfaces. As we touch it, we notice how cool it is. We can pay attention to the mottled patterning, which we first ascertain visually and confirm texturally in our hands in a synesthetic admixture. I always feel tempted to throw it. Its density and compactness awakens a tingling anticipation in my arm that says, throw it at a window or into water and see what happens. We could smell it if we were inclined, and however, I don't encourage you to lick it, as in this next section I'm about to tell you where it has been. Our theory of materiality as mere physicalness can be further complicated through a material semiotics approach. For David Howes, materiality refers to the fact that things, like this thing, facilitate and embody sociality. In his words, artifacts and commodities concretize social relations, and at the same time, they are bundles of sensory qualities or sensual relations. Or as Karl Nappert puts it, things become ciphers for social relations. And so we have a complication or problematization of our first theory of materiality. Because I engage with it sensually, and my senses undergird or even compose my very sociality in the world, my interpretive or representational capacities as a human being can't be separated from my sensuous apprehension of the color, weight, smell, and texture of this thing. The semiotics of it, what it means, can't be separated from my sensual discernment. In very simple terms, this theory of materiality shows us that answering the question, what is this thing, how does it matter, requires an understanding of what its sensory qualities mean to me as a social being. What intersocial affects are stirred when I grasp this thing? Now we have to start doing ethnography. I didn't find this thing. It was presented to me as a gift, and I was invited to guess what it was. I didn't have nearly the same existential crisis that I'm perhaps evoking here today. In May this year, I was 2 beers deep sitting at the U-Bar at Macquarie University after attending my graduation ceremony. It was given to me by Selvaraj Velayutham, or more affectionately, Raj, associate professor and friend in the discipline of sociology at Macquarie. Raj put this thing directly in my hand, and I was struck by its sheer weight and apparent imperviousness. Raj, what is this? I asked, a bit confounded, turning it over in my hands. What do you think it is? He asked cryptically. I pondered, pressing and rubbing my thumb around its smooth edges. It looks like some kind of rivet, I said. Yes, he said, but from where? Probing further. From where? A biographical question about this thing. He must assume that I would somehow know. Where have I seen rivets like this? A rivet is typically used to mechanically fasten pieces of steel together. I then became aware that if it is a rivet, it must have been cut off from something, and that it must have originally been significantly longer. The thing I was holding began to exude an air of eerie familiarity, and then it struck me. Raj had supervised a student in sociology who had worked as a mechanical engineer and who was involved in the structural maintenance of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. The rivet had been manufactured in Melbourne by machining company Macpherson's Proprietary Limited. The steel rolls for the rivet were smelted in Lithgow. The steel itself comes from iron ore, which forms when iron, dissolved in ancient waters beyond contemplation, settled out as mineral layers, which were buried, hardened over unfathomable millennia, and dug out of the ground a century or so ago on Wiradjuri country. This rivet had been cut from the bridge to be replaced and given to Raj as a gift, and now he had passed it on to me. Somehow the fact that Raj knew I would be excited about this object, that he intuited enough about my interests, that he considered and understood the weight of its significance of this gift for me, led to a renewed sense of affection for him. When I write, this thing sits in place in front of my keyboard between my forearms. I fiddle with it when I pause to think about the sentence I'm putting together. What this thing means to me, my affective associations, memories, and understandings of this thing are irrevocably tied up with its weight, texture, the press of its edges, the sound it makes as I place it on my desk as a new thought emerges during a writing session. Of course, the weight of my graduation fuses with the weight of this thing, the weight of its deep and shallow time past. But there is another weight I feel as it sits in my palm, the weight of my friendship with and affection for Raj. As we speak, the process of the partial dismantling of sociology at Macquarie is underway. While this thing gifted to me by my friend remains solid, durable, stable, and seemingly impervious, a combined intuition of impermanence and uncertainty and injustice pervades my sensibility. The materiality of this thing, a bundle of social relations spanning vast spatial and temporal scales, condensing and compacting material and immaterial into an indiscernible concoction. PhD graduation, Macquarie University, Sydney Harbour Bridge, the vertiginous primordiality of iron ore, the violent and unjust expropriation of Aboriginal lands, Lithgow Steelworks, the deterioration of steel production in Australia, the deterioration of viable manufacturing jobs, the deterioration of the arts and humanities in Australia, the deterioration of viable academic jobs. Raj, the threat of job loss, the threat of uncertainty, the threat of worthlessness, the anger of injustice and indifference. I hesitate even now to call it the rivet. That era of its biography is over, hence my preference for thing, though other synonyms, each with their own philosophical baggage, could do just as nicely: a substance, an entity, a phenomenon, a being, a becoming, an object. The point is that I'm ambivalent about reducing it to its historical function by calling it a rivet. Somehow it possesses an integrity which outstrips the social context in which it was once embedded. And we arrive thereby at our third and final complication of the notion of materiality. Jane Bennett, Diana Coole, Samantha Frost, Penny Harvey each advocate recognizing the vibrant materiality of things, their self-coherence and self-organization, their thing power in the world, their participation in swarming more than human conglomerates, their recalcitrant waywardness, their stubborn refusal to surrender to the meanings we thrust upon them, but also their bewitching and enticing allure, our dependence on them for our own vitality, the very thingness of us, the vibrant materiality of the human organism, that is the fact that our bodies are made up of stuff, all kinds of liquids and solids and sparks and states in between, all pulsing and oozing and growing, multiplying, excreting, metabolizing. I didn't put this in there just then. This is actually coincidental. It's nice. The challenge Bennett puts to us is to conceive of these materials as lively and self-organizing rather than as passive or mechanical means under the direction of something non-material, that is, an active soul or mind. Graham Harman, of object-oriented ontology fame, tells us that when we ask, what is this thing, our knowledge practices tend to produce two kinds of answers. One names what it's made of, and the other what it does. These are abstractions that hold the thing at a distance, but they do not foreclose other, more oblique and yet more intimate ways of sensing its reality. A complex theory of materiality tells us then that the thing that I've brought for show and tell has a tangibility and a physicalness, and that whilst being tied up in a complex array of human socialities and meanings, it cannot be simply reduced to these relations. The beautiful core of its being here is something I can't own, claim, reproduce, articulate, or even directly theorize. You may ask, how on earth, Daniel, does this have anything to do with research in the humanities? There are ways of doing theory, I argue, which don't reduce a thing to our knowledge of it, which seek intimacy with the phenomena at hand, without substituting it for a literalized, abstracted, and reductive account. At the beginning, when we first encountered this thing, I could have phrased the question in any number of ways. Why is this thing here? How did it get like that? What is going on with this thing? A weird way of asking it could be, why is it doing that? If I can be forgiven for being boldly reductionistic, these are all different versions of the question, what is this thing? Which is exactly the question we ask when we set out on our research, just with a whole host of other processes and entities at play, proposals, supervisors, ethics applications, research permits, literature reviews, and so on, making the question a lovely and complicated mess. Any kind of research question we can come up with is going to be a very complex, insightful, likely more brilliant version of what is this thing? Good theorization doesn't just answer this question in the form of plain explanation, it almost itself reaches out to touch the thing and reveals it in a new light as it embraces sensuality, materiality, and affect, the whole gamut, confusion, frustration, wonder, grief, surprise. Doing theory revitalizes our posture towards things, shines technicolored light on them as we participate in the world alongside them, without ever being able to get them to just sit still and behave. The reality of the world can't be coaxed into our theories, but our theories can lead us out into the world with a more tender tolerance for its mystery. And that's it. Yeah.